second. That's it. Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Joe Firestone for Real Progressives. It's Saturday night at 8. I need you to be especially vigorous in sharing tonight because it turns out that I set the broadcast to go to the wrong page, specifically to my page instead of the RP page. So we really need you to share as much as you can and to do a really good job at that. Okay, and hi, everybody. My guest for tonight will be Rodolfo Cortes Barragan. And he is running for Congress in the CA 40 Congressional District. And he is a true progressive. I think you'll see that he is even a real progressive. And that he has ideas that are more novel and more original and less seen out there than most other candidates that you will see. So it is with great pleasure that I have him on my program. And now I'm going to turn things over but to Rodolfo to tell us about his district and the situation there, and his positioning in the race. It's all yours, Rodolfo.
Thank you, Dr. Firestone. Thank you for having me on your show. Really appreciate it. Yes, hello everybody. My name is Rodolfo Cortes Barragan. I am a 30-year-old, so right in the middle of the millennial generation. I have always been involved and interested in the U.S. Congress, but it's only, now that we're in such a highly engaged political era that I decided, hey, why not just try it out and be a candidate. So I am running in, California's 40th Congressional District, which is Southeast Los Angeles County, essentially. The area is a Democratic stronghold. It has been for 70 years. I am running against Mrs. Lucille Rohrbat Allard, who has been there since I was a child. I remember she was already there when I was in elementary school since '93. And before that, we had her father, who was there for 30 years. So together, the Roybals have had the district essentially for 55 years. That seems like an awfully long time for one family to rule, but that is what we have had. For as long as Mrs. Rohrbat has been there, no one has really challenged her in a very large way, or attempting to mount really strong left progressive opposition. So this is going to be the first time I'm running just unopposed against her. There's nobody else in the race, so that's very interesting, because then I'm just going to make it all the way through the general, and hopefully we'll have a nice victory in November. So that would be very exciting, because the community in this congressional district really needs change. It'd be one thing if the Rohrbat family had, really brought progress to the district, but in fact, the district is overrun with pollution, poverty, and many, many, many other problems. There's so much that Mrs. Rohrbat could have done in 25 years in power to improve the situation, but she simply has not. And I'll just give you one example. There was a battery factory named Exide that was in the district and really negatively affected the communities around it. I've met people in my canvassing. I've met entire families with kids with brain cancer. One family, both kids have brain cancer, and it's because of the incredible damage that this factory had on the community, just around it. And she knew about this, and she knows about all of the other factories that are in the community that are right now, causing so many kids to have asthma, and that's a small scale problem compared to the larger problems that these factories are causing. But yeah, we have cancer. We have so many problems in the community. It's a hot spot for cancer, for pollution. So she's had a long time to deal with this, but I essentially found that she cannot, because the community is locked into the idea that we should be voting for her because she's the first Mexican-American congresswoman. So she is out there saying that she's delivering for the community. But in my judgment, as a Mexican-American, I just don't think that she is. There are so many people, seniors in the community, that are going homeless. There's housing insecurity. There's pollution already talked about. Students locked in debt. Myself, as a millennial, in that generation, I have $40,000 in student debt, and she's getting money from the companies that are financing this this debt problem that is hurting the economy so much, because millennials can't essentially start a life. They can't buy a house, have kids, all of these issues. So she just has not done a good job. And the mere fact that I've basically gone through my entire life and she's still there, and she's not using her position to really empower the community, improve things, that to me is cause for alarm. She sits on the House Appropriations Committee. This is very important, right? As we know, the House Appropriations Committee does a lot of work for trying to make sure how we're going to spend the funds, how we're going to allocate funds. And she has had so long to help the community in various ways, not just in Congressional District 40, but all throughout the country. And she just has not pushed. Instead, she wanted $700 billion for the Pentagon. That's what she gave to Trump, despite the fact that she's saying, we have to oppose Trump, we have to resist. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, all of those are some of the reasons why I'm running against her. But I would love for any kind of support that you may have. This is one of the most, I think, in my judgment, one of the most winnable races. Quite simply, she's just she can't defend her record to the community. You know, it's 86% Latino district, and yet she voted twice against impeaching Trump. It makes no sense. She's just out of touch. She's buying houses outside of the district, completely out of touch. So I think it's time for her to go. Thank you.
It sounds to me like it certainly is time for her to go, but I think people will be better able to judge that when they see positively what you are proposing. So could you talk about your own platform for us, please?
Of course. Oh my, there's so much to talk about.
I know there is, so tell us.
So of course, broadly, I am running as a Green for the first time in this congressional district. There's no history of Greens running. It's the vast majority of politicians in the area are Democrats. The community is used to having Democrats. But now I'm offering a Green option, and I'm, of course, pushing for what we could term the Green New Deal, which is a set of ideas that need to be refined into bills to pass through and be authorized, appropriated, so that we can have a sustainable future. So, for example, one of my dreams would be to establish a Department of Peace and Well-being. So this is something that we absolutely need. Why are we bombing, I believe right now, 8 countries? Why are we spending so much money on this war machine? It just, obviously we do get a lot of jobs from it. We are perhaps in some level, we have some influence over the world, and maybe that's a positive thing in some level. But we absolutely need to make sure that our children have a future, and it could even be our future. In 50 years, what is the world going to look like physically? So we need green jobs. We need to clean up the environment. There's so many things that could happen. Just in Congressional District 40, as I already mentioned, where it's extremely polluted. So, for example, there could be a jobs guarantee, right? That could be locally managed. There's a lot of things that we could literally be doing to clean up the environment in Congressional District 40. We have too many factories, and we have to start reining them in. We have to make Southeast LA green again, because right now it's just it's gray. It's completely polluted. We need a lot of changes. It's very similar to Flint, Michigan, if you're more familiar with that community and what has happened there. So there's a lot to do. Here's one concrete, perhaps another concrete proposal, Dr. Firestone. So, we have a big problem all throughout America with our water pipes. They're just old because most were laid down in the 20s, 30s. That's no different in LA County. So in parts of Congressional District 40, the water comes out brown. People are showering and it just comes out brown, and then people get these marks on their skin, and it's unclear what's even happening with the water. As I've already said, the Democrats have controlled this area of Los Angeles for 70 years. Mrs. Roybal has had 25 years to deal with this problem, to investigate it. So we need a federal solution. We need the money to change the pipes, just as we need to change the pipes in Michigan, and we need to create a Green New Deal so that we're not sick all the time. This community in particular, my community is sick physically because of so much pollution, and that could have been dealt with through an Appropriations Act from Congress, to improve the infrastructure. So that's what we need.
Yes, we do. Okay, but this still doesn't give people the impression of the broad sweep of your ideas and the platform. Okay, so I'm just going to read out a part of it. Guaranteed health care, housing, education, and water, and food, but for all. And notice, everybody, the emphasis is on the guaranteed. These are guarantees that are offered in this particular platform. Push for environmental justice, shut down disease-causing polluters, enact policies to heal the climate and reforest the earth, create Department of Peace and well-being, end the wars, teach children to interact with nature in a positive way, including growing their own food and using earth-friendly habits at school and in daily living, increasing resources spent towards R&D technologies in all sciences and fields of engineering, as well as investment in the arts and humanistic pursuits.
Absolutely, yes. So all of those things, maybe I could take it from the top. Of course, guaranteed health care. This is something that everyone's talking about, that we can absolutely have. There's no shortage of money for, to treat people with cancer, yet we have people dying from cancer and from many other diseases and problems, health problems that are being caused by, say, pollution. So we can absolutely have a single-payer system to make sure everyone's covered. In Congressional District 40, 10,000 children don't have any kind of health care. Many of their parents can't see a doctor. My own parents do not have health insurance. So this is a very personal issue for me, and I know that we can solve it. But again, my opponent, the incumbent, has never truly pushed for this. She is currently a co-sponsor, but of course that doesn't mean much. The Democrats had quite a big opportunity to make progress before, when Obama was the president. But yes, we can also have all the other things. Guaranteed housing. I saw that Jeremy Corbyn over in the UK recently said that they would give all homeless people a house because guess what? They can absolutely do so. Here in Los Angeles, we have a huge problem of homelessness. The tech boom has resulted in many people moving in with very high salaries. There's a rumor that Amazon is coming to Los Angeles for their second headquarters. So this creates a lot of pressure on the working class that has been there for so long, especially the Latino working class, which is not quite recovered from 2008. So many people are going homeless, especially, yes, certainly in Congressional District 40, and it's inhumane. It's completely it doesn't make any sense. This is not something that should be happening in this country, where we definitely have the resources to give every single person in this country.
Okay, so all the things we've been talking about since I started to read off the list come under the heading of a livable future. And you also talk about, under such a future, a green New Deal to help the species survive, return the climate cycle to normal, improve our infrastructure, employ the population, and chart a positive future for our youth. You advocate for the creation of a federal jobs guarantee with a basic income. So how do you see that working?
Absolutely. So it would be something like the Civilian Conservation Corps, perhaps, a little bit like it back in the New Deal days, where people had jobs because we saw the need for jobs. There's so many potential things that children could be doing. When I was growing up, many of my classmates, not quite, this wasn't me, but the first job was flipping burgers. So how about instead of teenagers going down that route, that being their first job, how do we let's give them a job reading to kindergartens. There are so many tasks that we desperately need to get done in the community. In my community, say cleaning up the graffiti, cleaning up the trash. There is so much trash. There are so many high schoolers and young adults who would be, for example, willing to do that. And we need to do that in order to have that livable present, livable future. So yes, I absolutely, if I was given the privilege to serve, I would absolutely, introduce or co-sponsor a bill in favor of a federal jobs guarantee with basic income, which would, give perhaps local governments, perhaps I would imagine as local governments have the funds to employ people in whatever the community needs, and then they don't have to worry about this and how they're going to pay for it, because right now, yeah, in some parts of the district and my district, the local government is charging families for, say, using the park, and that's because they don't have funds. Some cities in my district have gone broke, and where has my opponent? Where has she been? These cities are falling apart. There's no action, no help from her, even though she sits on the appropriations committee.
Okay, but specifically though, there are different ways for a federal jobs guarantee to work. The way the New Deal jobs worked was that those jobs were defined federally, and the projects were often carried out under the supervision of the Army, of military personnel anyway, even though it was under a civilian rule. But the current proposals for a job guarantee are very different, though, than that, aren't they?
Well,
so your proposal, how would it work?
My proposal would be locally managed. I think it's very important that the federal government not prescribe everything that has to happen throughout the country, because the federal government may not quite understand all the varying conditions that people are living in. So the local component, without certainly any, I don't think we need coercion or help from the military to manage it. We just need to get people to do the jobs that their community needs for them to do, and I think we can absolutely do that if they have the funds for it. Currently, there's no funds for anything in wide part of the district.
Right. You have, though, repeatedly said, in our interview, that there's really plenty of money for everything. But if we had your opponent on this program right now and we asked her, she would say that's a position which is fiscally irresponsible. We really have very little money for anything, and you're advocating the same kind of irresponsibility which the Republicans are showing. So how are you going to pay for it, is what she would say.
Absolutely, yes. That old line. So as I want to thank, I think the Real Progressives has really kind of expanded my understanding of this, and I think it's expanded a lot of people's understanding. Well, how we're going to pay for it? We simply do. Congress will pass, as they recently did, an appropriations bill, but that appropriations bill, so much for the military. How about some for things like infrastructure spending, or at least more than they provided? How about money for schools? Schools are falling apart. Teachers don't have the right supplies. It's unconscionable. It's unreasonable. The way that the current Congress and the past recent Congresses have been using their power to essentially create money, to will funds into existence, has been, I think, ethically irresponsible. They have been short-sighted. They have not taken their command to establish and promote the general welfare. We need to promote the general welfare. What does that mean? It means, in this day and age, it means keying in the values so that different departments can have the funds to help the people. So we can always pay for it. That is not a problem. It's more of an issue of, do we have the real resources to actually pay for the things that we want? Well, in the case of guaranteed health care and housing. We're not running out of logs to build houses in America. We have enough to make medicine, to train doctors. So paying for it is not at all a problem. I would say to my opponent, it's never a problem when Lockheed Martin and Raytheon come knocking at the door, and in her case, give her $14,500 just in the last election cycle, and then she voted for the $600 billion in military funding. Why do we exactly need $600 billion? Most of that doesn't even go anywhere. It's kind of lost. So of course we also need to audit that process. But no, we can always pay for it. I mean, that is what people are calling modern monetary theory really teaches us, and it's very clear that Congress, how they do it, they vote on they come up with an appropriations bill which establishes kind of the limits on how the broad structure of what's gonna happen, how they're going to pay for it, what's going to be. It's more what's the maximum, and then in the second phase of the bill, the authorization, then we decide exactly how much are we going to spend on Tomahawk missiles, or on the B-21 bomber from Northrop Grumman, or the F-35 from Lockheed Martin. How many billions of dollars are we going to spend on those things? It turns out to be a lot.
So here's a question, Rodolfo. Okay, so we do that. Okay, and say Congress appropriates for all the things we need, a considerable increase over the present appropriations that we have. So suddenly you, and others, but like yourself, who share our views, do decide to spend for lots of new things that people really need, and total spending by the federal government then rises to $5.4 trillion after you get into office. So then, according to the way the appropriation process works now, there might be a situation where the executive branch is mandated to spend the $5.4 trillion. So it has to start to spend it. And it starts to spend it. And of course, if there haven't been any new taxes levied, then at some point, but during the year, the federal government is going to run up against the debt ceiling. And then there may be, depending on how the race for Congress actually works out, and how many Republicans are in Congress, and how many blue dogs are in Congress, there might well be a debt ceiling crisis. And at that point, in the debt ceiling crisis, we may run into a situation where the blue dogs and the Republicans are screaming fiscal responsibility, and they're refusing to raise the debt ceiling. So that's one problem which you're very likely to face. And anyway, you can face it in concept. It's possible for the incumbent to raise that situation in a debate with you, and again ask, how are you going to get around the debt ceiling to pay for this? And even if you do get around the debt ceiling, isn't that going to create a horrible problem, because it's going to add almost $2 trillion more to our debt? And look at the mountain of debt we have now, and our grandchildren, our children are going to have to pay that off. But first of all, how are you going to get around the debt ceiling?
Great question. So yeah, part of it is right at the political problem, that people believe that the debt ceiling has been reached and that the debt is a huge problem. So I think that partly, to get away from that issue is that us who are certainly running on a progressive platform, I think we have a responsibility to educate the public on the fact that this is not a problem to run up the debt, right? The public debt is a private surplus, as as we are taught by MMT economists. This is the debt is not something that we should fear in the way that we've been taught to since certainly I can think of my high school economics teacher pushed that perspective that we were in fact that my generation was going to be stuck with the spending of the past. So no, we have to educate the public about the economic reality, and it's really not even that difficult to talk about it or to stand for the economic truth. It truly is a matter of, hey, asking, have your taxes gone up to pay for all the wars? No, right? They have, in fact, they've come down a little bit. So we can absolutely afford it. This is not it's not an issue. I mean, if it starts becoming an issue, then there's various measures we can have, such as maybe we tax here and there, to take some of that money out, so we don't create the inflationary situations. But no, we need to educate the people in blue or purple districts. I think it's important that we start educating the public, because this hysteria about the debt is what has held back our country for so long. Certainly, it's taken us back. We are still feeling the effects, right, of the so-called wonderful Clinton surplus. It's still being felt. I think that I saw Stephanie Kelton said that. And I in my own community, I think it's indeed being felt. The Latino community has recovered far less than other communities, especially in this area of Los Angeles where I am. So no, we have to stand up for economic truth. So if anyone says that the debt ceiling is going to be reached, we say, well, let's lift it. This is not a problem. And no, our children are not going to be stuck with problems. I mean, there's countries with lots more debt, than us, right? Like Japan. Have you been to Japan? Japan is a wonderful society. I mean, they have some issues going on, but they're extremely egalitarian. They have a lot of power. People there are economically, they're doing okay. And that's because the government was not afraid to spend. So that's what our government needs to do now. It's what other governments are doing to get ready for the 21st century. We're totally falling behind, and it's due to the refusal to spend on ourselves, which is just outrageous, because we're the ones that benefit. Paul Ryan will benefit from spending on the public. Everyone will. The country will do better. So we need to be just unafraid and loudly proclaim it that we can just keep going with spending.
Okay, so you are good with me on this. In other words, it makes sense to me. But problem one, okay, it kind of took you a long time to say it. It's not something you could easily say in a debate, okay, or in giving some answer to a reporter who's looking for a one-liner, okay, or a two-liner or something else. Certainly not a 5-minute speech on changing our whole society's perspective on the debt. Okay, and meanwhile, your opponent is using her 30 seconds of time to answer with some one-liners that are very familiar to everybody, because they've heard those at their grandfather's knee, and from their high school teacher, and also from the major papers, sometimes actually reflected in the LA Times. So the LA Times is actually more progressive, okay, than quite a number of the newspapers in the country are in certain ways. But anyway, most of the media that the people, okay, of LA are going to have access to are going to be media that will be reflecting the faux fiscal responsibility perspective, okay? And they'll be delivering the myths at you, okay, and the one-lines at you, and you won't have the 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to explain the monetary reality to them, in that kind of situation. So this, it seems to me, creates a political advantage, okay? And I think that I have an easy way to get by that advantage.
Right.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to introduce the easy way. And first, I'm going to do it in a simplified way. And putting this slide up on the screen and going solo with the slide. Can you see that okay on your screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you read it for me?
So, question. Your programs look expensive. How are you going to pay for them? What's your answer? Okay, I'll do it. At the end of every money bill we pass in Congress, we'll order the Federal Reserve to increase the balance in the Treasury spending account by the amount we've ordered the Treasury to spend. We'll also order the Federal Reserve to increase the same balance by enough to cancel the portion of the national debt that will fall due during the period covered by our spending. So that will fund new spending and also reduce parts of the debt as long as we go along until it is eventually gone. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so that's a short answer, but what it would require is for a progressive bloc in Congress, I don't even think it has to be a majority, to refuse to vote for spending bills until that clause is placed in spending bills. Okay, and the object is not simply putting that clause in one spending bill or two spending bills, but making it a boilerplate clause that goes into all the spending bills. Okay, so, if one could do that, then one would have a situation where the questions of, the debt's going to kill us, okay, and our grandchildren are never going to arise. And that would be quite apparent within 6 months of the passage of the first of the spending bills that had that particular clause in it, because during those 6 months, the visible national debt, the debt subject to the limit, would fall by $4 to $6 trillion. I haven't actually tracked exactly how much it would fall by, but there's something like $1.5 trillion, 1.6 trillion or something like that in short-term debt. And then there's lots of debt of the 2 to 10 year debt, okay, the Treasury notes, so-called, which are falling due each year and are repaid in each year. In fact, the rough figures on how much money the federal government pays back in debt each year is between $55 to $60 trillion in debt that are paid back each year. So it's obvious we pay back a lot more in debt than we owe at the beginning of the year. We owe $20.5 trillion. Mm-hmm. Okay. But we pay back 55 to 60 trillion. How is it possible? Because obviously we're rolling over a lot of the debt. In other words, we issue new 2 to 10 year debt and new 3-month debt and 6-month debt, okay, 9-month debt, okay, and so on. Okay, all through the year, and that's how we get that seemingly anomalous situation actually being the reality of federal finance today. Okay, So clearly, if we used a clause like this, it would be visible that we had removed, just with this simple clause, 1/4 to 1/3 of the debt problem within the first 6 months.
Right.
It seems to me that if anybody at that point were to claim that there was a debt problem, they could simply be laughed at. I mean, what kind of debt problem is it that allows us to put 2 sentences in an appropriations bill and 1/3 of it goes away within 6 months? Come on, there's no real debt problem here. We can pay for anything we want, including getting rid of the debt if we want. And this is the proof. You see, we just proved it to you.
Right.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're always going to pay for things in this way. And for those of you who are still not convinced, you'll be able to see as the months go by, okay, that the debt will get smaller and smaller. Now, it's not going to fall to zero for 30 years because there's 30-year debt out there. We just sold some 30-year debt. It's not going to mature for 30 years, so we're not going to pay it off for 30 years. You know, we don't want to cause an inflationary situation. Okay, so we're going to pay off this debt as it falls due, no slower and no faster. Okay, you know, exactly as it falls due, which is what this language actually implies. Okay, so it turns out this won't be any more inflationary than floating debt for deficit spending would have been in the first place. So we can have our private surpluses and we can get rid of debt as well, all at the same time, while we're using these appropriation bills. And we don't have to tax to do this. We don't have to tax to spend, and we don't have to tax to get rid of the debt. All we have to do is add these 2 sentences. Now, we do have to tax. We can't forget we have to tax, because what is taxing really for? It's not really to pay for things. It's really to head off inflation. It's to drain money out of the economy to make space for the government spending. So the truth is, folks, there's really no fiscal problem here. Now, of course, all this would take a longer time to explain, okay, than you have in a debate. But just in case people are really curious and they give you that time, then you can tell them the whole story. But the only story you have to tell them in the 2 minutes or the 30 seconds, okay, that you're going to have is just the words on this slide. That's all you need to say to them. And then say, that's a complete answer to the debt question.
Right.
Okay, and if you want to know why, you have to give me the time to explain why. But you can see for yourself, it's a complete answer because the debt is going to go away and everything is going to be paid for. And that's how I'm going to pay for it. Okay, and to simplify this even more, I'm going to give you a 1-line answer. Okay, ask me how you're going to pay for it. But once again, ask me that question.
How are you going to pay for it?
We're going to order the Federal Reserve to fill up the Treasury spending account so we can pay for it and pay off the debt at the same time. What do you think of that?
Nice. I like it. It's fiscally responsible.
It sounds fiscally responsible to me. I mean, we're going to pay things. We're Congress under Article 1 and Section 8 of the Constitution. We have the power to order the Federal Reserve to fill the Treasury account. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to order them to do it. They have nothing to say about it. That's the law. That's it.
I like it.
So then you can take a long time to discuss all these other aspects of federal finance. And this is a perfectly MMT consistent way to handle it. Okay, because from one point of view, of course, from the fiscal point of view, the debt is a faux problem. It's a false problem. But really, political problems are not false problems. They're real problems we have to get over. Politics is just as real as economics.
Yeah,
Okay?
I mean,
If people have false ideas about how to proceed with economics, they can have false ideas about how to proceed with politics too. In this case, the political answer is the short-term answer. If it's creating a real political problem, get it the hell off the table. Well, we don't have time for it. We have all these things to do in your platform. We have all these needs to accomplish. We have all these people to save. We cannot take the time to educate when it's going to take 6 months to educate, or a year to educate, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years. I myself have been trying to educate since early 2010. That's when I started educating about MMT. I've written hundreds of blogs, 7 books on the subject. Over the last year, I've taken to live streaming. Okay, guess what? Most of the population is still not educated to MMT. Now, I'm not saying we can't do it. I have no doubt that over the next 5 years, we'll make tremendous progress. And I have no doubt that in the next 15 years, we might finally get the majority educated. However, even after 15 years, there are going to be these die-hard conservatives who think we're telling them the fairy tales, and who think it's just like their household budget. Okay? And they're still not going to believe us. I mean, they'll never believe us as long as they live. Thomas Kuhn, when talking about changing paradigms, said, the way paradigms change is that the people who believe in them die off. And that's probably what's going to happen with our fiscal conservatives, our fiscal responsibility mavens. They're probably going to have to die off eventually in order for that paradigm to go the way of all flesh. Okay, and that's especially the case because at the household level and at the state level and at the community level, you can run short of dollars. And so you've always got that reinforcement going on, always creating a problem. So there's one other thing I wanted to say about this, okay, before we leave this particular subject. You know that the Republicans are about to begin another big push for a balanced budget amendment. Okay, and you know they have control of most of the state legislatures in the country. If they can get it through the Congress, in spite of how stupid and foolish it is, to do it, probably 5 years from now, 6 years from now, or maybe 7 years from now, they may have the votes in the legislatures in the states to actually push through that sort of amendment. And if it is pushed through, depending on how it's wording, it might be a disaster for the progressives, okay, and for the country. But the reason being that it means unending class warfare of all kinds, because there will only be a fixed pie to cut up in that instance. We won't be able to do any deficit spending. And we won't be able to grow economies easily either without having the benefit to take deficit spending, as we actually have had throughout the whole history of the Republic in one way or another. In other words, the excess federal money, which is out there now, is all due to deficit spending, as you know. So what's the best way to defend against a balanced budget amendment? Well, of course, there's education. There are emotional pleas. There is reasoned logic. There is trying to educate people that we need to be able to deficit spend because this is the policy space we have to recover when the economy collapses. This is the policy space we have to adjust to the climate crisis. This is the policy space we have to save our lives. Our very lives depends on this policy space. So therefore, but we can't have this. Now, these kinds of appeals may work with people, and we may block the balanced budget amendment. But what I'm going to suggest now is that the best defense against the balanced budget amendment is a good offense. And the good offense is what I've been talking about here, doing overt congressional financing. There's a name for what I've been talking about here, and that's it, OCF. And the reason why OCF is a defense and a cure for the balanced budget amendment is because before they're able to get through the 5, 6, 7 years they will need to actually pass the balanced budget amendment, if we, about 2 years into that, are able to take control of the House and force OCF in as boilerplate for every bill, then by 2 years and 6 months from now, okay, it would be apparent to everyone that the debt is really no problem. And with each passing month, it would become more and more apparent that it was no problem. And it would drain off the political support for the balanced budget amendment. I mean, why have it if the debt is no problem? Everything that's driving that amendment is the $20.5 trillion debt we have now. That's how serious the political problem is. It can force us into a balanced budget amendment. Mm-hmm. So not only is this a weapon to use for getting progressive legislation passed in the immediate future, just for the gains that could be gotten from the legislation, but it's also a weapon against the disaster of a balanced budget amendment actually passing.
Right.
So
right.
I wanted to make sure I gave that to you. Okay.
No,
tonight.
I think that makes
sense. Okay, it can be very important.
Really help people understand it specifically.
Well, I kind of do it on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday in little different forms. This is the first time I've talked about the use of it, okay, against the balanced budget amendment, because it's literally the first time I've thought of it. In other words, I woke up yesterday morning with that idea in my head, and this is the first time I've had a chance to talk about it. So just hang on just a second here. Let me banish this. Okay. So this here is the closest I could get to the legal language for overt but congressional financing. And when I was first talking about it and writing about it, I started off with the legal language for it. Okay. Because that was the first thing I thought of. I'm a political scientist, actually, okay, and not an economist, except by learning some economics. So the first thing I thought of was the legal language, okay, and I came upon the legal language by thinking what might flow from Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Okay. Now, I kept getting these objections from people. And I still get them. That, oh, this language is too complicated for people to understand. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but I do agree certainly that if you're talking about a 2-minute span of time, you can't explain to people the legal language within a 2-minute or 1 minute or 30-second span of time. But in 30 seconds, you can sure tell them, we're going to order the Federal Reserve to fill the Treasury spending account with the money.
Yep.
So there'll be no need for taxing. There'll be no need for using any bond revenue, which doesn't actually pay for things anyway, but I'm not going to explain that to you. I'm just going to acknowledge that's the truth. But I'm also going to say you can see quite clearly that the simplified language, the simplified answer, we have the power to order the Federal Reserve to do this, and that takes care of any payment question. Okay, now if you have other questions about taxation or inflation or things like that, I'll be happy to answer those. Just give me some more time. Takes more time. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to say something about that to you. Now, but one thing I also noticed in relation to your platform is you're very much into. Okay, well, first I should point up the heading of you want an egalitarian and just future, and you advocate for a reorganization of our society. And God bless you for it, too. Okay. And I rarely say that, okay, for reasons I won't explain on the air, but I very rarely say that, so you've gotten a very special saying from me tonight. Okay. So, and you list under that, under reorganization of the society, break up the anti-competitive corporate monopolies of today, establish communications, transportation, and energy as basic public utilities that are available to all residents, abolish taxes for low and middle income families, legalize undocumented immigrants, and have a pathway to citizenship. Yes, I completely agree with that. But as far as the dreamers are concerned, if I had my druthers, they'd be citizens tomorrow. They're Americans. They were brought up here, okay? And many of them very close to actually being born here. And they're Americans.
Yep.
And they should have citizenship tomorrow. I think a lot of Americans feel that way. And if they don't, I'll be available to give them a talking to about it.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of communities.
So, okay, you want to enact limits on CEO pay and on shares of companies in relation to workers, and I think that those are also very, very good ideas. I'll repeat, as so many people have already said, to have ratios of CEO pay to worker pay in an organization of 350 to 1 is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. We've got to take that down to something that's a human scale. Now, we could argue about whether it should be 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 or 30 to 1, or maybe at the outside, be 35 to 1. But whatever's beyond 35 to 1 is utterly and absolutely ridiculous, and that should not even be on the table for discussion. Okay, so I'm very glad that you brought that idea up, okay, at least in general. And then finally, under that heading, you want to establish government support for cooperatives, including allowing workers and unions to hold elections to transition private business into collectively owned and also managed the cooperatives. Yes, I'd like to see that too. And of course, when you advocate for that, you'll have to say, yeah, I'm a socialist. I sure am. And that shows you that I'm a 21st century socialist.
Right.
However, what I want to know is this. Do you like the idea or not? If you like the idea, then you can either say, yes, I'm a socialist too. Or if you don't like that name, then you can say that to advocate for supporting cooperatives and transitioning to to cooperatives isn't socialism, because socialism has always been understood as government control of the means of production, and that's not what I'm advocating for here. I'm advocating for control by the people of the means of production, cooperatively, business by business. That's very different. That's not socialism. That's cooperative capitalism. Well, you could argue that if you want to. I don't know. But what's in a label? The point is, not much is in a label. What's in the label is what stands behind the label. And you've always got to look at the ideas behind the label. And you've got to say, do I agree with those ideas or don't I agree with those ideas? Now, I think Bernie Sanders has worked this little trick. I don't think it's a trick. I think it's actually reality. But he's worked this in a marvelous way. He starts out his conversations, when someone asks him the socialist thing, he says, yeah, I'm a socialist. Okay. And he then says, hey, here's what I want. I want this. I want that. I want that.
Yes.
Do you agree with me or not? Are you with me? That's basically it. Okay. Get them to face the reality of what you want and decide whether they like it or not. And shelve the labels. Who cares what the labels are? That's nonsense. I mean, labels are nonsense. So, restructure the U.S. government. Rodolfo supports major transformations to the U.S. government.
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you like to tell us what those are, or would you like me to read it?
Yeah, no. So this is. So some of these ideas are, they're out there, but I think we really need to, certainly stand for at least some of them. So the first one is we have to increase the number of U.S. representatives by a heck of a lot. I think at least fivefold. So it's been over 100 years since we've had there was an act in 1911 that set the number at 435, and we've been stuck there ever since. When back then that was one representative per 200,000 people, and now we have one representative per 700,000 people. So that's why when you call your congresswoman, like when I call Mrs. Robles, when I have in the past, they never answer. It's just it's too many people for one person. So we need to move towards a model like they have, for example, in the UK, in Germany, France, where 50,000 people, for example, are represented. I think in the UK by one person in House of Commons. So that's just good for the representative process. If we're going to have this representative government, we need to have representatives that are accessible to people. Right now, they're essentially inaccessible, unless of course you have some perhaps very high kind of campaign contributions. Then.
Okay, so let me put a fine point on this. Okay, when the framers formed the Constitution, they viewed the House as the people's house, the part of the government that would be closest to the people. Mm-hmm. And that is why there were not so very many people to each one of the representatives in the House. Okay, and as we just heard, as Rodolfo told us, we used to have one representative for how many people, Rodolfo?
200,000.
For 200,000 people, right? And now, in actually Rodolfo's district alone, there is one representative for 723,000 people, correct?
Yeah, something like that, 700,000.
Right. Okay, so that's almost 4 times worse than the representation we used to have, okay, in 1911, and many times worse than the representation which our forefathers had when the country was first established. Okay, and as Rodolfo points out in his platform, in Europe, the legislatures there have the kind of representation we used to have, so that if our House looked like their parliaments look, we would have more than 2,000 representatives in our House. So their democracies are much more representative than ours are. If you lived in their democracies, you as an individual would have far greater influence over your representative than you have now over your representative here. So the idea that in terms of sheer representation, we are the world's greatest democracy is ridiculous. And as undemocratic as the House is nowadays, in terms of the number of people represented by each one of the Congress people, even past that, we have the Senate, and we have 2 senators who are presiding over states with populations that are vastly different, ranging from what? Is the population of California getting close to 40 million right now?
Something like that, yes. And
some of our states have less than 1 million in population. The same 2 senators, no more or less senators. So, in Rodolfo's proposal, it is recognized the counter-democratic nature of the U.S. Senate. I would say the anti-democratic nature of the U.S. Senate, and abolish it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we have unicameral legislature. Have unicameral. Now, interestingly, there is one state of the union that has a unicameral legislature, and that is Nebraska. It has had a unicameral legislature since, I believe, 1907 or something like that. It was a reform instituted by the progressives of that time, actually in their state by the prairie populists. Okay, so the point being that this idea doesn't necessarily create a runaway radical legislature, as the example of that state shows. One of the least radical states in the union is Nebraska, isn't it? And it has only a unicameral legislature. So, yes, we would have a much more representative legislature if we multiplied the numbers of the representatives that are in the House now, as he suggests, by perhaps 5 times. Okay, and if we got rid of the Senate, then our Congress would be much more consistent with us having a democracy or claiming a democracy.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at the situation that we have, say, here in California with Dianne Feinstein. You know, there's a lot of people running to replace her, and it's very difficult because she has built up the name recognition, and that's part of why it's anti-democratic, as you say. It's essentially very, very, very difficult to stand up to someone like Dianne Feinstein, who has kind of cemented her way into the voters' minds once they go into the ballot box. You know, they recognize that name. Feinstein, she has been there for a very long time. There's some good things she's done. There's some bad things she's done. You know, clearly she's not on the progressive sphere in these days. But it's very difficult to get rid of her. And this is in the state of California, but even in a place like Wyoming or Rhode Island, it would be difficult to get rid of the senators who if they've been there for a long time. Even far more difficult than it is to vote out someone like the incumbent that I'm challenging. It's just very difficult to cover an entire state. It's not feasible, honestly, for a grassroots campaign. It's just very extremely difficult. I don't know of a case where it has succeeded. Maybe it'll succeed this time in defeating Dianne Feinstein. We have so many people running, so good luck to them. But it's just very difficult, and that's why partly why it has to go. It's an anti-democratic institution. It's there to keep the power of the people in check, so that only one person is in charge of, or 2 people in charge of an entire state. There's too much power concentrated.
Yes, too much power concentrated at the top. In Feinstein's case, of course, she has now evolved to the point where if she is not a warmonger, she is a war supporter who apparently has never met a war she didn't like. And the other point is that, of course, thank you, honey. Of course, she also has been instrumental in passing laws that invade our privacy and that help to suppress our civil liberties and that weaken our democracy in quite a number, of other ways. And as someone who's one of the leaders, of Congress, she has no spine. When people come to Congress, I'm talking about people from the national security community come to Congress, and they lie to her in public, and it later becomes claimed. It gets clear that they absolutely have lied. She does nothing to sanction them. She never holds them in contempt. She never puts them in jail. She never exerts the prerogatives of the Congress and its constitutional position inside the federal government. She betrays that every time.
And so do the other senators.
And so do the other senators. They are simply not doing their jobs, as is the case of many of the representatives as well. For example, Nancy Pelosi. And also the congressperson you're running against, Roybal Allard, who is allied very closely to Nancy Pelosi, and I think it's correct to say, is Nancy Pelosi's creature, isn't she?
Your words.
She's Nancy Pelosi's puppet. She's the marionette who dances to the movements that are programmed by Nancy Pelosi.
Well, she certainly has risen in her career, thanks, with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi entered 2 terms before Robert Allard, but they have risen together, and Pelosi has repeatedly appointed Mrs. Robert Allard to very important posts, like she's the most senior member of the House Appropriations Committee I've already mentioned. And there was recently a special budget committee that was set up, and so she's been appointed to that as well. So yeah, perhaps she's working very closely with Nancy Pelosi on the Democrats' budgetary priorities.
And to put the perspective, of Nancy Pelosi in here, in other words, to give a perspective on her, she is one of the leading defenders within the Congress of the pay-go system of funding things now, which they honor in the breach by passing military bills without subjecting them to pay-go. But every time they get to spending on social programs or discretionary spending of other kinds, which are for the benefit of the people, then they insist on imposing the pay-go system and going to the CBO to find out whether these programs are deficit neutral. And of course, if they're not, then to be passed, one has to break a rule of the House that such programs are not supposed to be passed. Of course, they break rules like this all the time when it comes to military appropriations and things like that. But the point being that if Roybal Allard were to be defeated in this election by Rodolfo, then a main support for Nancy Pelosi would be kicked out from under her. And if the defeat of Nancy Pelosi by Steve Jaffe were to occur, and then the defeat of also Roybal Allard were to happen as well, that would magnify the earthquake politically.
Yes.
It would be a political earthquake, and that much greater because Roybal Allard fell also. So that's another reason why it's very important to support Rodolfo Cortes and to support Steve Jaffe as well, as two people who would be allies in changing the system in Congress. And there are many more people like this around the country that we're coming to know through these interviews, and that are beginning to organize together to exchange information and to discuss how they will run, how they will win, and how they will govern after they change the Congress.
Yes.
So,
very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. So, hand-counted paper ballots. You want those too. You want the federal elections to be 100% publicly funded. You want to outlaw gerrymandering. And you want ranked choice voting as the law of the land. Now, we've been seeing, of course, over the weeks, more and more candidates coming out for many of these. But also, with respect to Rodolfo, he supports all of these things.
Yes.
You do know about, in the sphere of campaign finance laws, There, of course, is the problem of the Supreme Court. If any of those are passed, there's a problem that the Supreme Court is likely to overturn them because they will consider them to be violations of the free speech rights of the artificial persons known as corporations. Okay, so so the question is, how do you get by that kind of barrier? Are you familiar with Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution?
Remind me, I
Okay. Article 3, Section 2 is the exceptions clause of the Constitution. Okay, so do you know what that clause will allow you to do?
Congress can overcome the Supreme Court. That's the one, right?
It can overcome the Supreme Court, but by denying jurisdiction to the Supreme Court, which is an appellate court. It only hears appeals. Okay. And the Congress has the constitutional power to tell the Supreme Court what its jurisdiction is going to be with respect to particular laws that Congress passes. So if Congress passes a new set of campaign finance laws and says, Supreme Court, hearing appeals, which are challenges to these laws, is beyond your jurisdiction. We're exercising our power, Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, to tell you, hands off. Well, then, the effect of it is that for that law, the Supreme Court would be out of it. It just would no longer be a part of the equation. Now, why would this be justified? Because this Supreme Court has run amok. And this clause in the Constitution was put in by the framers specifically to contain a Supreme Court that went beyond its powers. And it's hard to deny that this Supreme Court has routinely been doing this over the years, ever since the seizure of the election of 2000 away from Al Gore in favor of George Bush. It's been delivering periodically outrageous judgments that have no basis in common sense. Okay, so anyway, Article 3, Section 2. I did want to tell you about that. So, okay, moving along, I think that covers your issues platform.
Well,
I did want to... yeah, go ahead.
One more bullet point? One more. Maybe if we could just talk about, so I also talk about the executive branch. So this goes into the potential that we have in really ramping up the role of the House of Representatives. So as you can see in my platform, it's my opinion that we should really move towards a model like one they have in Europe, where we elect the executive from the legislature. So this would be very important because currently we have an executive branch, and especially its departments that are run amok, just like the Supreme Court. All the standard suspects, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, all these things that they're spying on Congress. Congress doesn't really quite know what they're doing, and in many cases, neither does the president. So they are really essentially on regular. They're free to do whatever it is that they want, whatever it is that they do. No one seems to know except them. So I think that's a mistake that we need to correct. How do we correct it? We bring them all under the control of Congress. So that means removing the power of the executive. We need to repeal and replace Article 2 of the Constitution. We really need to be thinking about that. The presidency is too powerful in this country, as is its whole branch, as I just mentioned. It's just too much power that's concentrated in one person, certainly in the president. We need to do away from that model. Not only is it anti-democratic, it's just not functional, as we see with many people. It's just People go in there into the presidency and we think they're going to be amazing, and maybe no, I'm sure that they all generally mean well. They don't mean to cause evil in the world. However, the situation can be very stressful, perhaps, and there's, ultimately there's too many stressors, too many things happening on them, and then they end up going to war and many other things that we later disapprove of. And a lot of this comes from all that power just being concentrated in one person. It's too much, just like all that power being concentrated into the senators and the Senate. That's too much power into two people. Well, it's too much power into one person in the presidency. So we need to rethink.
So I do have sympathy with that standpoint. Okay, I have a lot of sympathy with it. However, I'm not sure that when you take a modern government and the various functions of it, and you concentrate them in the Congress, as opposed to concentrating them in in a separate branch of government, that the end result is not actually pretty much the same. Okay, for example, during all this time that we've been fighting these wars, and our executive branch has been going crazy. The executive segment, it's informally a separate branch of government too, inside of the British government. The Prime Minister largely manipulates the Parliament. And that's true because any concentration of the executive functions, which is sometimes needed to fight wars or to run national policies in a complex society, any sort of concentration of that kind is dangerous. Okay, and the danger is not such that the parliamentary systems actually escape from that. So the question is, before we change our system from a separation of power system to a system which is far more like, let's say, the French system, where they have an executive who's separate, but they also have a parliament that is far more powerful, than our Congress is. Before we move to that kind of system, which I think is really the kind of move you're suggesting here, we perhaps first have to figure out how to bring all of the elected representatives, both the ones who serve a limited geographic area, as our Congress people do, and also the one who's supposed to theoretically serve the whole nation, specifically the President of the United States, how we can bring all those elected representatives under control when they seem to have been successful in, or let's actually put the fault, where it really lies. It seems like the institutions of wealth and the people behind them have captured our representatives due to their influence on campaigns, both through the money they directly give and also through the money that they give to media, so that they have control now of the media, and also control of the Congress, and control over the unions, and control over all the varied institutions that used to sustain a more pluralistic democracy during the 1950s and the 1960s. And so the question that we have to face, which to me is a more fundamental question, is not simply the overweening power, okay, of the executive branch in comparison with Congress, okay, but it's what reforms can we institute for the system as a whole to empower the people again, so everybody is accountable. Okay,
Exactly.
I think that I have an answer to that, and I don't think, okay, that it's a governmental answer, but talking about that would take actually another program entirely, and is actually beyond the scope, okay, of this one. What I did want to cover is a very last thing, okay, and then I want to call a hold to this, is that you have a vision, and your vision is, okay, the first thing which I want to ask you, okay, before we go into your vision is, does your platform represent your vision?
I think it gets towards my vision. Vision is something. It's a broad concept, broad goals. In the platform, I try to highlight specific things that can potentially get us to the vision.
Okay, so what is in your vision that actually goes beyond what's in the issues discussion?
Well, I think the vision, my aim is to encapsulate to isolate the problem and to propose the solution, which is, for the last 200, 300, maybe 400 years, we've had an economic system that has prioritized physical entities that have a psychological meaning, that is capital, money. So we have capitalism versus what we could have, what Bernie Sanders made popular in 2016, socialism. So many people think that that's a horrible word, but I think that number of people is dropping, and you really have to analyze the word. I mean, socialism, is it so bad to emphasize the social, meaning we are a collaborative species. You don't have to dig very far into evolutionary biology, human psychology textbooks to really understand that we are a deeply socially driven species. However, over the last few hundred years, we've allowed one aspect of our human psyches, the drive to accumulate assets, physical assets, to drive our behavior on a personal level as well as on a social level. So I think that's a problem, and we're really facing it now with, for example, I'll give you the example of the company Uber. Uber is a company that has thrived under the system of capitalism, where you chase the capital, in this case the U.S. dollars, to make more U.S. dollars for yourself and those who help you. That's the structure of the basic model of capitalism. But Uber, by contributing to, for example, people's tendency to want to move from place to place and really go on, with the touch of a button, I can get here, I can get there, and all that energy that is spent into driving that car is harming the environment in a way that a publicly available transit system that would be entirely free, which is what I'm proposing, that the train that's electrically run will not harm as much as so many cars that are driving up and down all of America's streets. So that is a problem that Uber has caused. There's been a net increase in the number of cars that are being driven. So many, including in my district, there's so many people looking for work through Uber, which of course then build into so many social problems, right? So it both creates a physical problem, which is exacerbating the climate crisis through the CO2 emissions, but then it creates this social problem where the capitalists just want to increase more and more and more. They want to accrue more and more resources, meaning the capital, the money itself, and that comes at the expense of the worker. Uber is a company that has been particularly, hashed out in the press as, some people are making less than $5, after total on their car and the gas, $5 an hour, and that's totally unsustainable. And it's happening right, certainly in Los Angeles and certainly in the Congressional District 40, where people are suffering, and it's because of this drive for capitalism. So we need to transition away from that system that is allowing our greedy side, or at least some people's greedy sides, to really take all the resources and dry up the world. We're literally killing our habitat. We need to realize we are a biological species. We live on a habitat. It's not, when species do not run afoul of their habitat, they spend all the resources, they die, right? We can see this in the animal kingdom. So that's what's going to happen to us if we do not transition away from this system of just allowing corporations to do what it is they want to do, which is make profit. So they harm the environment and they harm people socially. So that's why I say Albert Einstein had the quote, right? Capitalism is the predatory phase of human development. People are thinking about how can I make a little bit more money than the other person, even more. And like today we see billionaires. How can I make far more billions than the next billionaire? How can I bump up my spot in Forbes's list? And that's first of all, why they don't actually need all that money, and second of all, it just creates all these problems for the rest of society. So that's why capitalism is ripping societies apart while it's destroying the planet. So we need to apply water. So of course the famous quote is, we need socialism. Socialism is that water. Otherwise, we're simply going to collapse as a species. It's just going to happen because that's what happens in the biological world. Every day we hear reports. For example, the latest worry that scientists have is that insects. There's no longer as many insects as there used to be. In Germany, like these are studies that have been conducted, and all over the world there's less insects. Ooh, that's there's less insects. What does that mean? It means that the system is in wild flux, and we can see that manifested in all the wild weather that that we've had. Like Los Angeles had a lot of rain recently, whereas other parts of the country that are usually getting snow are not, and then others that are. So there's a lot of flux going on. You can clearly tell that our habitat is not too happy with us. So that's why we need to transition away from the model of constant consumption of capitalism, of the accrual of resources under very few hands, to sharing socialism.
Okay, so you are, I think, entirely right about that. But I also think that all that you just have said, and talked about, that when I ask, what concretely does this mean? And then I look at the set of issues that you list. Okay, it seems to me that you've represented all those things in a concrete way that people can agree with, or are able to, to disagree with, but without actually talking about the overall issue of capitalism versus socialism. And in talking about that through the issues, as I said, you talk about it in a more concrete way that people can evaluate.
Yeah.
In other words, they can look at the policies and they can say, these policies make sense to me. But when we start to argue about the capitalism versus socialism thing, well, first of all, not all of us agree on what the hell capitalism is.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Okay. In other words, the type of capitalism we have now is nothing like the type of capitalism, okay, that was written about by Adam Smith or John Stuart Mill or James Mill or any of the early writers on capitalism, okay, or even later than some of the writers on capitalism, at the time of Franklin Roosevelt. It's not even similar to the managerial capitalism of the 1930s, okay, that we had. Okay, it's really actually a different kind of capitalism that's almost synonymous, if not completely synonymous, with the idea, okay, of a system that rewards and embodies unmitigated by greed, acquisitiveness. It seems to me most capitalist theorists, except for a few of them, would say that's not capitalism. That doesn't correspond to what I mean by capitalism. Right. And insofar as it corresponds to what exists at present, I agree with you that what exists at present is an abomination. Okay, I don't think it's really capitalism at all. Okay. So when you say capitalism is a fire that is destroying the planet, they would not agree just because they don't mean the same thing by capitalism, okay, that you mean. Mm-hmm. Okay? And they don't mean the same thing by socialism. As I said before, they might think that, socialism is where the government owns everything.
Right.
Okay? And they might not see a society where things are predominantly based on the cooperatives as that socialist a society, as long as there was a place for small business, for example, or the occasional extremely large business that was founded on principles of social responsibility and social justice and behaved in that way. So, I mean, I'm wondering what use it is to bring the dichotomy home in this way, and then also use a paraphrase of the famous phrase of Marx in the manifesto. Okay? Okay. In other words, you're inviting Nancy Pelosi and the Roybal Allards of the world to say, hey, Rodolfo's a communist. Look at this, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Except obviously you took the his out, but because you're not a sexist. Okay? So I suppose I have to raise the question, why wave the red flag in front of the bull? The bull. It just, it seems to me unnecessary when most people would be 95% in agreement with your issues anyway. So why muddy the water by framing the vision in this way? It's so easy to frame it as simply out of control selfishness and acquisitiveness, okay, and greed and but chasing an unfettered market that's completely controlled by selfishness,
Yeah.
and but call it a new feudalism,
Right.
okay, and the development of an aristocracy, an irresponsible aristocracy, okay, an oligarchy, as um, Bernie Sanders calls it, and I usually call it also. I think all those terms, okay, are justified by it. But and I think it's a lot easier to express your vision in words like that. So I ask, why put it in the way that you do, since it raises issues which the rest of your website doesn't raise?
Interesting. Thank you for framing it in this particular way. I mean, one of my goals is to make sure that I'm campaigning and as I'm trying to present myself, and I'm being as honest as I can be. Like, for example, I've already said, for example, I'm $40,000 in debt, in student debt. That's in addition to other kind of debts I have. But I want to make it clear. I mean, part of my I want to have a transformation of society, which it certainly involves all of my specific policy proposals, and that goes into the larger intellectual, philosophical idea of socialism. So part of my goal is to encourage people to read up more on, to learn more about all of these issues. And I mean, I think that just talking to people in my district, we're talking about Los Angeles County. We're a very liberal, progressive area. So these ideas are actually not that. I don't think it's that out of place for for a lot of for people in the district, and especially young people. We had for the longest time, we had only older people who were voting, but in the 2016 election, well, we saw so many young people. I think inspired by socialist Bernie Sanders, and those young people, for example, represented in that CNN debate where Nancy Pelosi said the Democratic Party is capitalist, even though this millennial who was representing kind of the future and how my generation is thinking about things said that we're thinking socialism. We want more emphasis on meeting people's basic needs, which is really kind of I think one of the core ideas of socialism. I mean, from the motto that you read. So I'm just trying to be forthright, open with my ideas, which I don't think that they're that even not radical for my district. A lot of young people are wearing hammer and sickle hats. It's people are very tired of the system that we've had for so long, and it's right. Just we need.
Well, I think you have to be the judge of what is good in your particular district and how to frame things.
Absolutely,
okay, of your district. Okay, and I'm not arguing at all that the way you framed the issues and the configuration of those issues is not a socialist program. And I'm not arguing that you should not say, that it's a socialist program. I agree with that end of it completely. Where I think it becomes controversial is the characterization of what is wrong, and what we're opposed to as capitalism. And the reason why I think that that's the case is because but looking back on my life and looking back on the history that I've read, it's not a type of capitalism that we've encountered too many times before. Something similar probably happened in parts of the 18th century, okay, and parts of the 19th century, when in the first throes, okay, of capitalism, the system was very, very cruel to workers without any countervailing forces involved. But for much of the history of capitalism, and even then, in those times, there was kind of an overlay, some sense of morals as a limiting factor to what they could do without outraging society. Whereas in this phase of the Randian form, okay, of capitalism, the Paul Ryan form of capitalism, they recognize nothing except the demands of selfishness, okay, and greed. And so anyway, it sort of creates a situation where people are arguing with you about capitalism over socialism, rather than arguing with you about the issues. And you win on the issues.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I'm gonna think about it. Thank you.
I don't know. That's the way it hit me.
Thank you.
And okay, but anyway, in general, when it comes to the issues, and when it comes to socialism, there's really nothing I disagree with in your platform. I think it's really terrific. Okay, and your views are terrific. And if I were in your district, I would happily go to the polls and would vote for you, and would work to help you gain office, and would make the contributions that I was able to afford. Okay, so if you'd like to and need to come back sometime, I'd be happy to have you come back. And I don't know whether you've been contacted by Johnny Axum yet, okay, or by others in the group, but there's 116th Congress coalition of people who are running under the progressive manner that's forming now, and I think you'll have a very comfortable place in that particular coalition. Something else you might want to look into is there's there are quite a number of congressmen now who have signed on to the contract for American Renewal, the CFAR, and that's a contract of some 12 items that one commits to voting for, okay, and to never working against, and that gives people some basis on which to hold a congressperson to a standard, right? Introduces some accountability. So, but Victor Tiffany is actually running that effort, and CFAR is very closely aligned with the Real Progressives group, okay, at this time, and constitute a very important of the activism efforts that we are currently supporting. So if you could take a look at this
Yeah, I've read it. I'm going to read it over again. There's so many. When you're a candidate, you find out that I've received like 10 things that people have asked me to sign. Things for ethical government, contract, term limits. I got some stuff from gun rights people recently. There's a barrage.
Everybody's looking for commitments.
Yes.
Okay, but this group is a growing group. Steve Jaffe just signed on. He was at first also rather reluctant to sign on because he was kind of worried about the legal side of the commitment. But he talked to Victor. Okay, and while it does present a standard which gives constituents some expectations about the minimum that you'll support. In your case, in most instances, you go, I think in every instance, you go way, way beyond what the CFAR actually requires. So it seems to you signing up to it is a kind of a no-brainer. Because you'll basically be saying to your constituents, well, here's a hard commitment, okay, that I'm making to this, but I actually want far more, as is reflected in my platform. Okay, and then you're joining with, I guess now there must be from 30 to 3,500 people who have signed on to CFAR. That's Congress people and some senatorial candidates also sign on to it. So it's something growing and will probably continue to grow all through the summer.
Well, I'll have to take a look at it again.
Okay, and before I say goodbye to everybody, okay, I'd want to also say to give you a chance to tell people where they can go if they'd like to donate to your campaign or support you in any way. So if you could give them the coordinates, please.
Absolutely. So this is a grassroots campaign. So of course, we're up against hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the good news is that my opponent has never truly campaigned. Perhaps since '92. She never actually has a campaign because none of her challengers ever truly attempt to mount a campaign. It's in a very interesting situation that we've had in this congressional district. It's a low turnout district, so your donation will go very far because we truly actually only need a few thousand voters. That's what the numbers come down to. It's a very winnable race because the community is fed up, but the community has forgotten about her a little bit. We've forgotten about her. I mean, I never thought about her for many years, except for when it mattered. So yeah, you can go to my website, which is Rodolfo for Congress, RODOLFO for Congress, for spelled out, .com, and there's just a link there to where you can go donate. It should be very easy for you to donate. So I would really appreciate any donations. They really help out a lot. Again, it's a very low turnout district. This means that your donation goes very far. I am the only challenger, which under California's top 2 primary election laws means that I will be on the primary. It will just be me and her for June 5th. That's the primary, and then in November. So I think it's a really great shot. It's honestly very fortunate. I got really fortunate. There's no other challenger. So, I mean, of course, I'm running on my ideas, but also I'm trying to mount a referendum on her because she just hasn't helped the community. And she has a lot of opportunities to help the community, given that how much power she has in the U.S. Congress and her closeness to Nancy Pelosi. It's been too many years. There's been no progress. The community is suffering. It can totally happen. So, yeah, any donations, much appreciated. Very helpful. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and so also I need to mention folks as well. Real Progressives has a Patreon account. And if you're so moved by these sessions, please do go to the Patreon account. We also could use a donation. And I personally have a Patreon account. Okay, and if you like my live streams, okay, and my interviews, then if you're so moved, I would also certainly appreciate one, but only if you can afford to do it. Okay. So thank you very much. And I'll be seeing you on Tuesday when I interview Dorothy Gasquet, who is running for Congress as a Democrat, I think a Justice Democrat, in Washington State. And she's also a progressive and a very intelligent one as well. So thank you, Rodolfo, for coming tonight. But once again, okay, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Me too.
And good night, everybody. Mm-hmm.